Whoa, hey there guys. Back again with another super late video. This is something I drew on stream maybe a year ago. I think it's about a year ago exactly at this point. But I figured that it's time to actually finally edit it because Fire Emblem Heroes came out last month. This one was pretty interesting for me because Lucina's design is kind of deceptively simple in a way. When you look at it, it's mostly all different shades of blue, with a little bit of, the red cape as an accent and some gold accents here and there. So I thought it'd be pretty straightforward to draw. And I originally wanted to draw the mask too, but as it turns out, all of her design is just, there's a lot of these little intricate things that you gotta get right, otherwise kind of throws the whole thing off. So I just gave up on the idea of doing the mask altogether. I have always liked Yusuke Kozaki's work. I like the way that he draws his faces. They have a lot of character. I don't know exactly how to describe that, but I really like faces with character. I think what it really boils down to is that he takes time to shade the faces and kind of define the face a little bit more, which is something that I'm really bad at. Most anime faces is just like this flat plane of skin color, and then this little line in the middle for a nose, and then big eyes and a mouth. That's something I'm trying to move away from, but there's always this weird, hard balancing act that you have to do, where you have to make it anime, but at the same time, you want it to be realistic. So there's this weird balancing act that you have to do. I don't think that I did it too well here, because last year I was just starting to kind of come around to that idea, but it looks here like I kind of did the nose a little bit pretty well, but I don't have too much going on with the face. One thing that still really screws me up is trying to get the definition of the cheekbones. It's just so hard because skin tones, if you just move the color, on the color wheel, if you just move you change your saturation, or you change your hue, or you change your brightness just a little bit, then things can get pretty screwed up pretty quickly. And even sampling other people's work for skin tones and what the values that they used for shading still doesn't work out at all for me. I still end up with something screwed up. So I usually have to spend a lot of time on the skin and getting that skin. But actually, in fact, I like shading skin the most, I think. Followed up probably by a lot of the more matte materials that I try to render. Not the face though. I really like doing torsos, the shading on torsos, and then also probably legs after that. I'm not too much of a fan of doing arms and hands. The other thing, now that I'm looking at it, the thing that really screwed me up here, or that I have trouble with, is with leather. I can never, brown tones in general are really hard for me. Are really hard for me to do. I don't know why. Brown is another color that is really easy to screw up. I'd say that the colors that are hardest, or that are really easy to screw up, are colors like orange, yellow, and brown. Everything else you can do pretty well. I can get the colors for the shading down pretty well, but I have a really tough time, especially with brown. I don't know why. It's just really hard to get the saturation right on the darker values of brown that you're going to use for the shading. But going back to Yusuke Kozaki, I have one of his art books. It's KYMG2. I'm looking through it. I have it in front of me right now. Looking through it, I didn't realize that there was Fire Emblem stuff in here. There's actually a pretty good character reference for Lucina with I think it's either her older brother or her dad or something. There's something weird. I never played Awakening, but I know there's some weird time travel stuff going on, and everybody's related to everybody, so it's one big family type of thing. But I think it's Lucina with I think his name is Chom, who's her father, I think. Well, I really wish that I could have remembered that I had this book before I drew this picture, but it's too late now. Going off topic a little bit, some of my favorite pictures in this book is the section where of the Vocaloid. I think her name is Miki. the one with pink hair and a crazy ahoge. I really like those. They feel a little bit earlier than some of the other work in this book, but they still stand out to me as my favorites. There's also one in the section of, I think it's the last one, in a girl's trigger, or maybe it's not, I don't remember, but it's this girl lying down in a hallway. I like the color in that one, and it really strongly reminds me of Vofan's work, even though Vofan is a lot more bright and a lot more cheery. For some reason that one really reminds me of something that Vofan would put together. But getting back on track, it was definitely an interesting challenge working on this and balancing all the different shades of blue that are going on in this picture. I already mentioned that her character design is super blue. A blue tunic, a blue scarf, blue boots, blue leggings, blue, I don't even know what you would call what she has on underneath the tunic, but that ribbed sweater type thing, and blue shoulder pads, like blue everything. In the original design, it's a little bit more monochromatic. I had to go out of my way here to kind of push the blues to be different from each other, but still be harmonious, just so then you could distinguish between the different parts, because there is a difference between the blues in the design. For myself, I really like designs with more contrast, where you can more clearly distinguish between the different elements of a character design. So I wanted the boots to stand out compared to the tunic, and then the scarf to stand out from the boots and everything else. But it was a little hard to do that when everything is all the same color, basically, in the character design. But I think I was able to do that mostly because the materials that each piece of her armor or her costume are made out of are different materials. So I really tried to make the fabric more flowy, and the boots to be a little bit more matte and leathery, and the shoulder pads to be metallic. But if you look at the actual character design, I didn't follow those blues at all, because those blues are a little bit more blackish, dark bluish, and I try to brighten it up a little bit more. The shoulder pads also gave me a lot of problems with how to render out their shininess. Again, the character design didn't provide too much in that realm. It's a little bit more flat, which is fine. I just wanted to make it pop out and be a lot more metallic. The metals also here, all the different gold accents, and especially the sword, gave me a lot of trouble because I just generally really suck at rendering metals. I'm okay. I'm good at. We already talked about skin, and I'm okay with cloth and fabric, but metal is hard for me. I mean, the most key thing to do with metals is to make sure that there's a gradient and make the contrast between light and dark as much as possible. But adding in hard shadows is really tough for me. I don't know why. I just have a hard time placing exactly where that shadow should be. It's the same thing with the highlights as well. I think it's because the metals are so shiny. You can really tell that I dislike rendering metals because I left it for it's the very last thing that I did. It's just so tricky to balance between where the light and the dark is and still make it look like a metal. That's why I like matte is way more straightforward to render. And this sword design is like really intricate, which made it a lot harder to visualize where the light and dark is. I understand, usually when I draw, I try to keep the 3D shape in mind, and I have the shape very much in mind when I was drawing this, but placing those light and dark sections was really, really hard. And at least the character designs that I was looking at, it's a little flat the way that the sword is rendered. I don't know why I just didn't go with that. It just also made mine flat. I like to render out everything to the same level of detail, or at least I try to, because otherwise it doesn't feel right to me. I think everything needs to have not necessarily the same level of detail, but at least look like it's been worked on to the same degree as everything else, which I know doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's weird. Sometimes when you look at something, you're like, oh, that's underworked, or oh man, I overworked this way too much, I need to restart it. That being said, I don't think that the reason why I draw faces last is because faces are my least favorite part. I think it's just because it's the last little bit to help finalize the figure. For me, drawing without the whole context of the picture is really tough. So usually I have to, if I start doing the skin first, then when I'm finally done shading everything else, I need to come back and do the skin again, because then I can draw it based on how everything else is shaded. The face is also that way, because if I do the face first, I think that, at least mentally, it makes the face stand out way too much. I kind of want to leave that towards the end and make the face match the look of the rest of the shading of the body and the armor and everything else like that. Okay, so now we're getting into the Photoshop section. I usually don't record this portion, but since I was on stream, I just kept on going. Mostly because the Photoshop, whenever I go do Photoshop, there's a lot of experimentation, and you can never really know exactly how to finish an image until you start playing with it. So this section is actually slowed down quite a bit compared to the drawing portion of it. What I just did right there is that I made the line art colored, basically by duplicating the bottom layers with all the shading and the highlights, and then doing a Gaussian blur on that, and darkening it a bit, and clipping it onto the line art. Other than that, it looks like all I'm really doing is that I'm playing around with the curves and the brightness and saturation, and I put a little bit of gradient on it just to make it a bit more interesting. So with that, I'll see you guys in the next one.